Oh, good. I mean, it's quite a long time since we finished it now because I finished mixing in.
For decades, the Rolling Stones were the embodiment of rock and roll excess, fame, and untouchable success. But behind the swagger and the hits, there was another story. A web of conflicts, betrayals, personal tragedies, and feuds that nearly tore the band apart more times than their fans could ever imagine. Today, former bassist Bill Wyman has finally opened up about what really went on behind the scenes. And it's not the glamorous tale many expected. Instead, it's a saga of power struggles, backstabbing, and deep wounds that never quite healed. From the very beginning, the Rolling Stones were a band of contrasting personalities. Mick Jagger and Keith Richards, the dynamic songwriting duo, ruled the group with an iron grip, leaving little room for others to have a say. Wyman, a founding member, found himself sidelined time and time again, watching as his contributions were overshadowed by Jagger's larger-than-life presence and Richards' rebellious persona. But Wyman wasn't the only one who felt the strain. Guitarist Brian Jones, one of the band's original members, was slowly pushed out as his influence waned. His erratic behavior and struggles with drugs only made things worse, leading to his tragic drowning in 1969. Though the band publicly mourned, insiders knew the truth. Jones had become a liability, and by the time of his death, the rest of the group had already moved on without him. There was one battle that defined the Rolling Stones. It was the ongoing feud between Jagger and Richards. The two were inseparable in the public eye, but behind closed doors, their relationship was a constant power struggle. Jagger saw himself as the business-savvy leader, while Richards, fueled by his love for raw rock and roll and a never-ending supply of drugs, felt the band was losing its edge. The tension boiled over in the 1918s when Jagger decided to pursue a solo career, leaving Richards furious. Richards saw it as a betrayal, calling Jagger's solo music pretentious and self-indulgent. The rift between them nearly destroyed the band. For years they barely spoke outside of performances, each plotting their next move. When Jagger refused to tour in 1986, Richards retaliated by releasing his own solo album. An open act of defiance that proved he wasn't afraid to go his own way. Brian Jones was one of the most tragic figures in rock history. He helped form the Rolling Stones, but by the late 1916s, his role had diminished drastically. He was drinking heavily, experimenting with dangerous drugs, and alienating himself from the rest of the band. Jones was arrested multiple times for drug possession, which threatened the band's ability to tour. By 1969, Jones was fired from his own band, a move that left him devastated. Just weeks later, he was found dead in his swimming pool at age 27, officially ruled as death by misadventure. Many still speculate that darker forces were at play.
It didn't seem, and Paul was so natural and relaxed, and he enjoyed it, and we knocked out.
Jones' death became one of rock and roll's most infamous mysteries, and even though the Rolling Stones carried on, they would never fully escape the shadow of their fallen bandmate. Think of the ultimate rock and roll femme fatale, and you'll probably picture Anita Pallenberg. The actress and model wasn't just a muse to the Rolling Stones. She was deeply entangled in their most toxic dramas. First, she was Brian Jones' girlfriend, but their relationship was filled with violence and dysfunction. Then, she left Jones for Keith Richards, setting the stage for years of chaos. Her presence in the band's inner circle was both intoxicating and destructive. Pallenberg and Richards became inseparable, living a life of excess that revolved around heroin and partying. But as the years went on, their relationship crumbled under the weight of addiction and tragedy. Their son, Tara, died as an infant, a loss that shattered Richards and sent Pallenberg deeper into self-destruction. Eventually, she and Richards split, but not before leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. December 6, 1969, what should have been a triumphant moment for the Rolling Stones turned into one of the darkest days in rock history. The Altamont Free Concert was meant to be their answer to Woodstock, a free festival that showcased the power of music. Instead, it became a nightmarish descent into violence, chaos, and death. From the start, the event was plagued with problems. The venue had been hastily changed at the last minute, leaving organizers scrambling. The stage was positioned dangerously low, making it nearly impossible for the band to separate themselves from the restless, agitated crowd. The Hells Angels, hired as security in a disastrously misguided decision, were paid in beer, leading to a volatile mix of aggression and intoxication. The tension escalated throughout the day. The Angels, wielding pool cues and chains, began beating concert-goers indiscriminately. Audience members, some high on acid and others simply desperate to get closer to their idols, clashed with the enraged bikers. The atmosphere was electric with fear, the sense that something terrible was bound to happen. Then the moment of horror arrived. As the Rolling Stones played Under My Thumb, 18-year-old Meredith Hunter, a young black man, tried to approach the stage. Paranoid and fearful, he pulled out a gun, perhaps as a desperate act of self-defense. In an instant, he was swarmed by Hell's Angels. One of them, Alan Passaro, plunged a knife into Hunter repeatedly, killing him in full view of the horrified audience. His lifeless body lay just feet from the stage as the band continued to play, unaware of the tragedy unfolding before them. The entire gruesome event was caught on film, forever linking the Rolling Stones to one of rock's greatest tragedies. When they finally learned of the killing, shock and disbelief washed over the band. Mick Jagger was visibly shaken, his charismatic bravado shattered. But there was no undoing what had happened. The headlines were merciless. The Rolling Stones were accused of fueling the disaster, of hiring violent criminals as security, of being complicit in a deadly act of rock and roll mayhem. It was a moment that haunted the band for years. The dream of Altamont, a free concert, a celebration of music's unifying power, had transformed into a living nightmare. What was meant to be their crowning achievement had become a symbol of the dark, uncontrollable side of rock and roll excess. The Stones had wanted to prove they could bring peace and music to the masses. Instead, they walked away from Altamont as the unwilling faces of rock's most infamous disaster. The Rolling Stones' history is riddled with legal battles and drug scandals, a testament to their reputation as rock and roll's ultimate outlaws. Keith Richards was arrested multiple times for drug possession, with one of the most infamous cases occurring in Canada in 1977. He was caught in possession of heroin, leading to charges of trafficking, a serious crime that carried the possibility of life in prison. The trial sent shockwaves through the music world. As the days ticked by, the possibility of Richards being locked away forever seemed more and more real. The weight of the situation hit him hard, forcing him to confront his own self-destruction. Miraculously, he escaped with a suspended sentence thanks to the intervention of a blind fan who testified that Richards' music had changed his life. It was a bizarre twist of fate, but one that kept the Rolling Stones alive. Yet, rather than being deterred, Richards continued to flirt with danger, pushing the boundaries of excess like a man determined to test his own immortality. Mick Jagger, too, had his share of legal woes. In 1967, he and Richards were at the center of a highly publicized drug raid at Redlands, Richards' country home. The authorities, eager to make an example of the infamous rock stars, stormed the estate and uncovered drugs, leading to Jagger's arrest. The trial became one of Britain's biggest rock scandals, transforming Jagger and Richards into rebellious counterculture icons. Jagger was sentenced to 3 months in prison, a shocking verdict that sent fans into outrage. Newspapers questioned whether the justice system was targeting them for their celebrity status rather than the actual crime. Under immense public pressure, the sentence was reduced, but the damage had already been done. From that point forward, the Rolling Stones were under constant police surveillance, their every move scrutinized by authorities waiting for them to slip up again. But legal troubles weren't exclusive to Jagger and Richards. Bill Wyman, while never a drug user like his bandmates, faced his own controversy when his past relationship with an underage girl resurfaced, further tainting his already complicated legacy. Even Charlie Watts, the band's most reserved member, wasn't immune, though his legal troubles came from unpaid taxes rather than the reckless indulgences that defined his fellow Stones. Over the years, Jagger and Richards became masters at evading serious consequences, their legal escapades only adding to their rebellious image. Every arrest, every scandal only seemed to fuel their mythos as the ultimate rock and roll survivors. But behind the scenes, these close calls were more than just media spectacles. They were battles that could have destroyed the Rolling Stones at any moment, leaving them teetering on the edge of disaster over and over again. Behind the fame, the members of the Rolling Stones faced personal hardships that often went unnoticed. Charlie Watts, the band's quiet and disciplined drummer, battled heroin addiction in the 1918s, a shocking revelation given his reputation as the most reserved member. Watts, known for his calm demeanor and dedication to jazz, found himself spiraling into self-destruction, a contrast to his usual composed image. His addiction nearly cost him his marriage and even his place in the band, but he managed to pull himself back from the brink before it was too late. Mick Jagger endured multiple high-profile breakups and a string of paternity lawsuits, proving that even the biggest rock stars weren't immune to relationship chaos. His long-term relationship with Jerry Hall, which seemed to be the one stable thing in his tumultuous life, ended in a bitter split when his affair with model Carla Bruni surfaced. The media had a field day with Jagger's ever-growing list of lovers, but behind the playboy image was a man constantly battling the consequences of his own choices. The court battles over his children drained him emotionally, and while he never showed it on stage, those close to him knew that Jagger's personal life was often just as exhausting as the endless world tours. Bill Wyman, despite his low-key public image, had one of the most controversial personal lives of them all. His marriage to Mandy Smith, a woman he began dating when she was just 13 years old, remains one of rock's most unsettling scandals. The relationship was widely criticized, with tabloids relentlessly covering every detail, painting Wyman as a man who had crossed a moral boundary that even the rock world found uncomfortable. Even decades later, the controversy never truly faded, casting a shadow over his legacy. Wyman, for all his musical contributions, would forever be linked to a scandal that many found impossible to overlook. Keith Richards, meanwhile, lived through his own personal tragedies. His decades-long relationship with Anita Pallenberg, already tormented by drug addiction and toxicity, ended in devastation when their young son, Tara, died unexpectedly. Richards, for all his bravado, was deeply shattered by the loss, though he rarely spoke about it. His battles with heroin addiction, multiple arrests, and near-death experiences only added to the weight he carried. The excesses of rock and roll may have defined the Rolling Stones, but beneath the surface, each member paid a price that few outsiders could truly comprehend. Through all the scandals, feuds, and near breakups the Rolling Stones endured, they outlasted their rivals, conquered generations of fans, and cemented their place as the ultimate rock survivors. But as Bill Wyman's revelations show, the price of fame was steep. Behind the music there were betrayals, tragedies, and conflicts that left scars on every member. They may have lived the ultimate rock and roll dream, but they also paid the price for it, over and over again.